You know, relationships can be tough, and we've covered a lot of tricky situations on this show. But today, we're tackling a topic that hits a lot of people hard. We're diving deep into infidelity. And if you're listening right now and you're dealing with this, well, you can feel like the rug's been pulled out from under you. It's rough.
Absolutely. It really shakes your foundation.
Exactly. And we've got a couple of articles to guide us to unpack all of this. How to handle a cheating partner from WikiHow, and how to cope with being cheated on from ReachOut.
Our mission here, in this deep dive, is to help you pull out the most helpful advice from these articles and try to get some clarity when things feel super messy. There's no easy answer when it comes to this stuff.
Right. We're not here to give you a step-by-step guide because honestly, there isn't one. Figuring out what moving forward even means, that's different for everyone. First things first, you got to decide if you even want to rebuild trust.
Yeah, you have to decide that even before you figure out if it's even possible.
Like, it's not just about can you rebuild trust, it's do you want to?
Such a good point. A lot of times, we jump into how do I fix this without even asking, do I want to fix this?
Exactly.
It's like trying to rebuild a house on a foundation that's totally crumbled.
Right.
You have to first be like, wait, is this even the right foundation to build on in the first place?
Right. And WikiHow talks about this. They suggest really thinking about, like, the circumstances. How did you find out about the infidelity? Was your partner straight up about it? Did they come to you, show remorse? Or did you discover it on your own?
Those details really matter.
Yeah.
They tell you a lot about whether your partner is willing to take responsibility for what happened.
But that's got to be there if you want to rebuild anything, right?
Right. You also got to look at their past behavior. Have they broken promises before? Is this a pattern? If it is, that road to rebuilding trust is going to be longer and harder.
Now, this part is interesting. WikiHow actually ran a poll. They asked their readers who've been cheated on. And get this, 56% said that praying for their partner helped them practice forgiveness. What do you think about that?
I think it shows how personal forgiveness really is. For some people, their faith is what gives them strength, helps them deal with the pain.
Right.
But there's so many different ways to work through this. The key is finding what works for you. Maybe it's journaling, therapy, maybe it's art, something creative to express all that anger.
So trying to understand why the infidelity happened, that might help make sense of things. But both of these articles, they're clear about one thing.
What's that?
Understanding why doesn't make it okay. It's not an excuse.
Exactly. Understanding isn't about saying it was all right. But sometimes, the reasons behind infidelity are more complicated than we think.
Yeah.
Like WikiHow points out, it's not always about sex.
Okay.
Sometimes it's about wanting an emotional connection they feel like they're not getting, or it's a reaction to something difficult in their life, some kind of crisis,
Right.
or even just a way to escape dealing with bigger issues.
And they even mention things like maybe their parents were unfaithful, or even cultural influences playing a role.
Yeah. It makes you think, there are a lot of layers to this.
Definitely.
And looking at those layers, even though it won't change what happened, it might help you decide what you want to do next.
Okay.
Do you try to rebuild with your partner? Do you go your separate ways? Do you just try to understand your own role in how things played out?
Yeah. So let's say rebuilding trust, what you decide you want to do.
Okay.
WikiHow has some steps to take. And the first one, I think this one's pretty universal advice.
Yeah.
Cut off contact with a third party.
Right. Seems simple enough, right?
Yeah.
But it's crucial. Because that contact, even if it seems harmless, it can just keep reminding you of what happened. Makes it so much harder to move on. You need to start fresh as much as you can.
So they also talk about setting boundaries. For future relationships, this is for both of you, not just your partner. You have to figure out what your non-negotiables are when it comes to interacting with other people, what makes you feel safe and respected.
Yeah, and you need to be open and honest about those boundaries. Not just a one-time conversation, but something you keep talking about as your relationship changes.
It's about building something new.
Right.
Based on transparency and understanding each other.
Exactly. And, when it comes to communication, there's something we need to clarify. Rebuilding trust isn't just about the person who cheated, proving they've changed.
Oh, you mean it's not all on them to fix it?
Right. It's not a one-way street. It's got to be a joint effort.
So both people have to put in the work.
Exactly. Their actions, the person who cheated, they caused this break in trust. But healing it, that's a shared responsibility. It takes both partners being willing to put in the effort.
So what does that actually look like? What do you do?
Well, WikiHow says it's really important to make a space where you can talk openly and honestly, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
It's about listening to each other, really listening. without judging or blaming.
That's got to be so tough, especially when you're still hurting.
It is. And that's where Reach Out's focus on self-reflection comes in. Both people, they need to figure out what they need from the relationship, what's non-negotiable for them, what are they willing to compromise on, and how can they talk about those things, those needs, without attacking each other.
So you're saying it's not just about saving the relationship you already have. It's about building something new, something better.
Yes, with a stronger foundation, built on respect and understanding.
And a lot of times, that's where professional help can make a big difference, right?
Absolutely. Both WikiHow and Reach Out, they recommend couples therapy to help deal with all these complicated feelings and learn to communicate better.
It's like having a coach in your corner for your relationship, helping you see those patterns that aren't working and figure out how to change them.
Right?
But even with all that, even if you're both working hard, there's no guarantee you can fix things. Sometimes the damage is just too much.
That's true. And it's tough to accept that, but it does bring up something important, knowing when to walk away.
When it's just not going to work.
Yeah. Reach Out asks some really good questions to help you figure that out. Like, are you always fighting? Do you feel disconnected from your partner? Is there still that hurt and anger, even after trying to work through things?
Those are hard questions to ask yourself.
They are.
But sometimes walking away, that's the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
For yourself. It's
Yeah.
about knowing you deserve better and not settling for a relationship that hurts you.
Exactly. And even then, even if you decide to end things, there's still a way to heal. WikiHow is interesting. They talk about connecting with other people who've been through the same thing.
Other people who've been cheated on.
Yeah, whether it's support groups or online forums or even just sharing your story with friends and family you trust.
Yeah.
Knowing you're not alone, it can really help.
Like a lifeline when you feel like you're drowning.
Right. It reminds you that other people have gone through this and they came out okay on the other side, gives you hope. And it reminds you that healing is possible, even when it feels impossible. And through all of this, through all of it, remember what we talked about before? Self-care is so important.
Oh yeah, it's so easy to forget about yourself when you're dealing with all this emotional stuff.
Right. It's easy to put your own needs aside, but self-care, it's not selfish. It's what you need to heal.
So what are some of those basic self-care things?
Reach Out says, start with the basics, get enough sleep, eat healthy food, and move your body, get some exercise.
Yeah.
Those simple things can make a big difference.
Right, like taking care of your physical needs helps your mental and emotional state too.
It's like giving your body the energy it needs to handle everything that's going on. And don't forget about doing things you enjoy, whether that's being in nature or reading or spending time with people who make you feel good.
Yeah, make time for things that nourish you.
Exactly. And if you need it, don't be afraid to get professional help. A therapist can give you tools to manage stress, cope with difficult emotions, and develop good self-care habits.
So it's like having a guide to help you heal and figure yourself out.
That's a good way to put it. And remember, self-care isn't selfish. It's about protecting yourself, making sure you're strong enough to get through this, and come out stronger on the other side.
You know, it's interesting. We're talking about infidelity, but a lot of what we're saying, it applies to relationships in general.
That's true. It doesn't matter if you stay with your partner or move on, all these things. Communication, setting boundaries, self-care, they'll help you in any relationship.
So it's not just about getting over this heartbreak. It's about learning to have healthier relationships, period.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been a lot to unpack, this whole thing about rebuilding trust after infidelity. But I'm realizing a lot of what we've talked about, it can actually help us build stronger relationships, period. Even outside of romance.
I think so too. Like, yeah, you've been dealt a really tough hand, but there's a lot to learn from it.
Totally.
It's like, those wildflowers that grow back stronger after a fire.
I like that. So what are some of those relationship superpowers we can take away from all this?
Well, both WikiHow and Reach Out, they both talk about clear, respectful communication. And that's not just about saying what you need. It's about really listening to what your partner needs too.
And not just waiting for your turn to talk. Right. Like actually listening.
Right, exactly. And learning to say how you feel, even when it's uncomfortable, in a way that doesn't make the other person defensive. That takes practice, but it makes such a difference in any relationship.
Yeah, not just romantic ones either. Imagine how much easier things would be at work, with your family, even with friends, if everyone was better at communicating about what they need, what their boundaries are.
And speaking of boundaries, that's another big takeaway from this whole discussion. And it's not about controlling someone, it's about respecting each other's space. Emotionally, I mean.
So being able to say what you're comfortable with what you're not comfortable with,
Mm.
and then, actually sticking to those boundaries if someone crosses the line.
And that goes back to self-respect, knowing your own worth, not settling for less than you deserve. And that applies to all your relationships, not just this one.
This conversation has also made me think about taking responsibility, even when you've been hurt.
It's so easy to blame the other person.
Oh, yeah.
But at the end of the day, we all play a part in how our relationships work. You have to look at yourself and be honest about, any patterns or things you do that might be contributing to the problem.
Not blaming yourself, but being self-aware.
Right.
So you understand what triggers you, what you need, what you tend to do, so you can be a better partner in the future.
Exactly. And realizing that relationships change. We're all changing.
Right.
So you got to be open to learning, adapting, communicating your needs as they change.
So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what's the one thing you want to leave our listener with? Something to think about as they deal with all of this.
If we go back to what we were just talking about, remember moving forward doesn't always look the same. For some people, it might mean staying in the relationship and rebuilding it. For others, it might mean ending it, starting fresh, either on their own or with someone new.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong answer. The most important thing is to trust yourself. Listen to what you need. And remember, you deserve love, respect, and happiness.
I love that. And to anyone out there going through this, remember, healing takes time. Be kind to yourself. Talk to people who support you. And don't be afraid to reach out to a therapist if you need help. You have the strength to get through this and build the future you want.